Alrighty, welcome everybody, and like I said, we want to greet our brethren around the world who will be, I guess you could say, through modern technology, keeping this feast with us in the wilderness. So on three, let's give them a big Chag Sameach. 1, 2, 3, Chag Sameach! Wow, from the wilderness. You can see the electricity flying up and down. We've been having an amazing time so far in the wilderness. We're just here a couple of days. Yahweh provided really an awesome place for us. And like I always say, when you get rain during Sukkot, because now we're going into the early rain, right? You're coming up with your harvest fruits, and this is the joy and the celebration. But now nobody knows when the rain is going to start. So when you get rain during Sukkot, it's a great blessing showing Yahweh. And not only did we got rain only a few hours after we started. And rain and hail, right? Lightning. I mean, we really saw Yahweh's cherubs putting on some show for us last night. It was amazing. Really, really nice. So our first song we're going to sing is number 5, Days of Elijah.
Declaring the word of Yahweh. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And though these are days of great trials, of famine and darkness and sword, still we are the voice in the desert, crying, prepare ye the way of Yahweh. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. And the trumpet calls, so lift your voice in the year of Jubilee.
Praise Yah. Okay, our next song is on page 11, Hinei Ma Tov. How wonderful, and what a blessing it is for brethren to dwell together in unity.
Hinei Ma Tov U'Manayim, Shevet HaKingdom Yachad. Hinei Ma Tov U'Manayim, Shevet HaKingdom Yachad. Hinei Ma Tov, Hinei Ma Tov, la 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 la. Hinei Ma Tov, Hinei Ma Tov, la 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 la. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together. In unity, la 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 la. In unity, la 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 la. Hinei Ma Tov U'Manayim, Shevet HaKingdom Yachad. Hinei Ma Tov U'Manayim, Shevet HaKingdom Yachad. Hinei Ma Tov, la 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 la. Hinei Ma Tov, la 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 la. For brothers to grow together. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to grow together. In unity, la 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 la. In unity, la 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 la. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together. In unity, la 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 la. In unity, la 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 la. La 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 la.
Wonderful. And let me say also how good and how pleasant it is for sisters to dwell together in unity. We are not neutral gender here. Alrighty, if we take our seats. We will have our Torah reading from Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. And for some reason, if we could not get this message online today, and they get it later, I'm apologizing in advance. I cannot be responsible for the internet in the wilderness. Okay, Leviticus 23, and starting in verse 33. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, In the 15th day of this 7th month shall be a feast of booths 7 days to Yahweh. On the first day will be a holy gathering. You shall do no laborious work. 7 days you shall bring a fire offering to Yahweh. On the 8th day you shall have a holy gathering. And you shall bring the fire offering to Yahweh. It is a solemn assembly. You shall do no laborious work of service. These are the set feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim holy gatherings. To bring a fire offering to Yahweh, a burnt offering and a food offering, a sacrifice and drink offering, the thing of a day in its own day. Beside the Sabbaths of Yahweh, and beside your gifts and all your vows, and beside all your freewill offerings which you shall give to Yahweh. And also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather the increase of the land, right? That's why it's also called Feast of Ingathering. You shall keep the Feast of Yahweh 7 days. On the first day a holy day Sabbath, and on the 8th day a holy day Sabbath. And you shall take to yourself on the first day the fruit of majestic trees, palm branches and boughs of thick oak trees and willows of the valley, and shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim 7 days. And you shall celebrate it a feast to Yahweh 7 days in a year, a never-ending statute throughout your generations. In the 7th month you shall keep it. You shall sit in Sukkot for the 7 days. All who are native in Israel shall sit in Sukkot, so that your generations shall know that I caused the sons of Israel to live in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your Elohim, and Moses declared the appointed feast to Yahweh to the sons of Israel. So this year, when we have the Sukkah, I'm hoping we'll have most of the harvest fruits, but it may be mostly manna hanging from our Sukkah. We will see, but we will try. We have our portable Sukkah with us to take in the wilderness with us. Okay, just quick announcements. Like I said again, what a blessing we've had so far being here. You know, really amazing group, and maybe not as many countries as we normally have at Sukkot, but we do have 15 countries that I already thought of. Maybe there's more that are here with us. So praise Yahweh for that we really have worldwide representation in the wilderness, which is really, really nice. And like I said, when we're done, we will have some snacks that Sister Petra will put out. We have the offering box back there also that she has behind Elder Eric. And we look forward to fellowshipping with everybody. So I don't think I need any more announcements right now. So we are blessed to have our sermonette today from one of our elders from South Africa, Elder Wilco.
Shalom. Chag Sameach. As a son, as a father, as a grandfather, I want to talk about the importance of teaching your children the truth. Let's read from Lucia 4, verse 6. Most people know the first part of this verse. It says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge. Because you rejected the knowledge, I also rejected you from being priest to me. Since you have forgotten the Torah of your Elohim, I will forget your sons, even I." Can you allow it that Yahweh forget your children? I cannot. This was one of the verses that changed me to the truth. Not only your salvation depends on your knowledge of the Torah and the truth, but also your children's eternal lives. So what is truth? All religions, all denominations will proclaim that they have the truth, the whole truth. But everyone is reading the scripture through their own set of glasses. If your glasses is red, you won't see the red letters. Your glasses are green, you won't see the green letters. Some is half of the Bible. Some is certain verses, that's why they miss some interpretations. In John 18, verse 30, John 18, verse 37, the last part, Yeshua talked to Pilate. He said, "For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, that I might witness to the truth. Everyone being of the truth, hear my voice. Do you hear his voice? Pilate said to him, what is truth? So let's go and see what is truth. The Hebrew word for truth is emet. It means firmness, faithfulness, truth, sureness, reliability, stability, and it comes from the root aman. To support, to confirm, to be faithful, to be verified. Is everything that you know being verified? Truth is the opposite of a lie. In my job daily, I do scans for pregnant women, and I like to show them the little hands, the little feet, every detail of the baby, the heart, the brain. And then I always come to the ear and say, oh, you're very blessed. Your baby has one right ear or one left ear, depending on which side the baby is facing. And then mostly they fell for the trap. As I said previously, I fly fish for Yahweh. Then they say, so they will be able to listen. I say, that depends on the mama. Because if you tell them lies and tell them not to lie to mommy, if you tell them about Father Christmas and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and hidings that they're going to get that they don't get, at 4 they figured you out as a liar. And then when you want to tell them about the Messiah, they're not going to believe you. So be careful what you say to children. They have brains. What a blessing if your children do not know the things of the world. If they could grow up without those that I mentioned. If they only know the truth. I came the hard path to the truth, having to find out first all the things that was wrong that I believed was right. When I first came to the feast, it was a blessing finding people that do not know all the things that's wrong, but they do know the truth. What must we teach our children? A truth seeker is a person that finds 1 or 2 truths and never looks again because he found what he was looking for, a truth. A truth lover always looks for the truth, doesn't matter what. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, prove all things, hold fast to that which is good. If you're a truth lover, it doesn't matter if something comes up, whether I'm right or you're right. All that matters is what is truth. We don't fall for something that seems to be truth and we can't prove it. But if there's something that was not the truth, we will always turn to the truth. So that's very important, that you teach your children everything that you know that's been proven as truth. Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 to 8 is the great Shema. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh, your Elohim, is Yahweh, Echad. And you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. and you shall diligently teach them to your sons, and shall speak of them as you sit in your house, and as you walk in the way, and as you're lying down, and as you're rising up. And you shall bind them for a sign on your hand, and they shall be for you for frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. This was given to the whole congregation, but verse 7, to diligently teach it to your sons, is specifically for the parents. It's the parents, the commandment to the parents that they must teach their children. It's not for the government or any other organization to teach your children. Scripture tells us in Psalm 119, your Torah is truth, in verse 142, and all your commandments are truth, verse 151. So to be practical, what can we teach our children? We can start at the very beginning. We start with creation. We tell them that everything that we see was made by Abba Yahweh and by Yeshua. We teach them the commandments, because we know the commandments are truth. We teach them to love Yahweh is the first and greatest command. We teach them to love your neighbor as yourself. We teach them the fear of Yahweh, because that is the beginning of knowledge. We teach them to know Yeshua. We teach them to know that you need a Redeemer, and that is Yeshua. We teach them to know that when you fall, and all men will fall, you repent and then turn back to the way of Yahweh. That is how the prophets pleaded with the people all through Scripture. At feast times, you have the opportunity to practically teach them the salvation of Yahweh through the feasts. But who are the children you should train? Firstly, you must train your own children. Well, let's say they just borrowed to you, so let's rather call them Yahweh's children, the ones He put in your care. From Deuteronomy 6:7, and you shall diligently teach them, that's the commandments, to your sons, and shall speak of them as you sit in your house, and as you walk in the way, and as you're lying down, and as you're rising up. You do that every day. And with any opportunity, when you walk in the field, and you show them plants and animals, and you tell them about Yahweh's creation. When you look up at the stars, you tell them that Yahweh put them there. For among other, His feast times. When situations occur, you can train them what is the right way to handle it. And remember, your actions speak louder than words. Do not tell them, show them. We have this example from the Waldenses, that whether they were working or walking or whatever they were doing, someone was teaching the Scripture truth. 2 Timothy 4, verse 2 to 4 say, preach the word, stand by it, in season and out of season. Convict, warn, encourage, with all patience and teaching. For a time will be when they will not endure sound teaching, but according to their own lusts, they will add to themselves extra teachers according to their own desires, and they will turn away their ears from the truth and will be turned aside to fables. Always is a good season to teach your children. And that goes for all the children in the congregation that is in your care or in your company. If you do not, the world will install its lusts, its desires, its lies, and its fable into your children. So why must we train them when they're young? Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child on the opening of his ways, even when he is old. He will not turn aside from it. The story was told about the Rabbi Joseph Kahneman that went around to orphanages after the Second World War looking for Jewish children that were placed there during the war. And you always hear, there are none of yours here. Then he would start to sing, Shema Israel. And immediately all Jewish children would cover their eyes. It goes like that. Even adults do it still today. So it was easy for him to say, that one is mine. It was something that they were taught at their mother's knee, and it stayed with them all their life. If you train your child when they're young, when they make a decision or are confronted with a problem, the truth of Yahweh that was installed in them will guide their actions through His Spirit. In a plane is an instrument. It's called the direction indicator. You set it on your destination, and then as you drift due to wind or whatever, it tells you how far you're off your course and to which side. That's what the Holy Spirit and your foundations do for you. If you're far from your destination, like a child, our destination is the kingdom. They only need to make small adjustments to get back on the way. If you're an adult or closer to your destination, then you must make big changes to your direction to get back on the way. So give them the opportunity to continue just that little bit to stay on the way. When John wrote to the congregation in 1 John 3:18 to 19, he said, "My little children, let us not love the world. Let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. And in this we shall know that we are of the truth and shall pursue our hearts before Him." All of us are also still children and lambs of Yah that need to be trained every day. So for the elders and the leaders of the congregation of Yahweh, you have some extra adult children that also need training in the truth. Most of us came to the truth later in our lives, and do not have the deep-set foundations of truth that we now have the blessing to install in our children. As one of my African brothers at the last feast remarked, how few can say, like the Israelites, Yahweh, the Elohim of my the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, the Elohim of Jacob, and how many of us can say, Yahweh, the Elohim of my great-grandfather, of my grandfather, of my father, in our own lives? How many of us are 4 generations in the truth? The Waldenses, the Polenses, and most of the true remnant groups had a history of more than 4 generations knowing the truth. What a blessing. If you are the first now to come to the truth, don't be despair. Train your child in the truth. And if there's enough time left, your child will train your grandchild. That was Yahweh's way through the ages. This is also the meaning of 1 Timothy 2:15 for the woman. Yet she shall live by means of her children if they continue in the faith, and in love, and in holiness, and in chastity. The mothers teach the little children. But as they grow up, the father must install the doctrine of Yahweh. As husband and wife are echad, so they must be in parenting. The parents must train their children in the truth at home. At home is where they will learn it. The governments of the world will not help with the truth. The truth is so important because Yeshua said to Thomas in John 14:6, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And to the Samaritan woman in John 4:23-24, but an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father also seeks such. The ones worshipping Him, Elohim is spirit, and the one worshipping Him must worship in spirit and in truth. That's what we must do. John 17, one of my favorite chapters, where Yeshua and Yahweh is echad. We read in verse 3, and this is everlasting life, that they may know you, the Elohim of truth, and Yeshua Messiah, whom you have sent. If we drop down to verse 16, they are not in the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in your truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. And I fear for their sakes. I sanctify myself, so that they might also be sanctified by the truth. If you're training your children, you have done the commandment of the Shema, and also you have sanctified your children in this world we live in today. Shalom.
Thank you, Elder Wilco. And now, before the main message, we are blessed to have special music by one of our deacons from the Philippines, Deacon Vincent and his wife, Sister Mary Bell.
Chag Sameach. Since we don't have a guitar, praise Yahweh that we already made a background music for times like this. Praise Yahweh. We will sing a Shabbat song that will be, we will sing. Sorry, that will be found in Psalm 92, verses 1 to 5. So. Praise Yahweh for this opportunity. That song is Tov Lehodot LaYahweh. להודות ליהוה לזמר שמך עליון להגיד בברך חסדך ואמונתך בלילות היגיון בחינוך להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות טוב להודות ליהוה לזמר לשמך עליון להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך Praise Yahweh. Maybe we have to just turn that a little bit higher. Just trying to get the
voice recorder on here. Alrighty, Chag Sameach. Wonderful to be here with you all in the wilderness. It's amazing, like it says in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing better than to eat and to drink and enjoy life with the wife of your youth and friends, and that's what Sukkot is all about. And here we are in the wilderness and enjoying good time together. And of course, the book of Ecclesiastes is the book we read. I'm going to do a message on that later in Sukkot. But today I have a message called Earthly Jerusalem versus Jerusalem Above. Earthly Jerusalem versus Jerusalem Above. And really it's kind of a prophetic message to give a perspective kind of on world events and how they're happening today. Starting in Deuteronomy 12. Deuteronomy 12. It says, "You shall not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, but you shall seek to the place which Yahweh your Elohim shall choose out of all your tribes, for you shall seek his dwelling to put his name there, and you shall go there. And you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes and the heave offering of your hand and your vows and your freewill offering and the firstlings of the herd and of your flock." So we know that the holy days are not Jewish holy days. The Jewish people like to try to say these are days only to the Jews, which they are not. They are Yahweh's holy days to his people, and they're for all time. So they have meaning, they tell the plan of salvation, but very clearly here, Yahweh is telling his people to seek him to the place which he shall choose of all the tribes of Israel. And if we go to 1 Kings 14:21, and what I'm going to basically do for maybe the first 20 minutes or so of this sermon is just go through prophetically from the time of Israel up into where we are now in prophecy. So 1 Kings 14:21 says, "And Rehoboam the son of Solomon reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahweh chose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there." So very clearly, none of us deny that Jerusalem is the city where Yahweh put his name. Jerusalem is the place where the Garden of Eden was, and Jerusalem is the place where Yeshua will return. If you go to Jerusalem today, though, it does not look like the Garden of Eden, even though it was the same place, and it certainly doesn't look like the kingdom of Yahweh that it will be when Yeshua returns. As a matter of fact, we know when Yeshua returns, and I'll read it a little later in Zechariah 14, even just the very physical landscape around the city of David, and the Fort Antonia is all going to change in the Kidron Valley when the great earthquake comes and it changes. But without a shadow of a doubt, Jerusalem is the earthly place where Yahweh put his name. There's no doubt. 2 Samuel 5, 6 and 7. 2 Samuel 5, 6 and 7. It says, "And the king and his men went to Jerusalem to the Jebusites." This is when David is going in and overtaking, right, the Jebusite city and taking it for the city of David, those dwelling in the land. "And one spoke to David, saying, You shall not come in here, except you will turn away the blind and the lame, thinking David cannot come in here." And many of you have seen it. It's amazing, in the last 20 years, they have rebuilt Mount Zion and have uncovered the Canaanite walls, the Jebusite walls there, that they had no idea they could build those walls that high. So they're really mocking David. They're saying the blind and the lame could protect us against you. So what happens next? And David captured the stronghold of Mount Zion. It is the city of David. And we've talked about this many times. Mount Zion is the city of David. It is not Fort Antonia, which is a third of a mile away, which today they're calling the Temple Mount. 2 Samuel 7, go over a couple of pages, in verse 12. So what's very interesting, though, the point I want to make about this is, because like I said, I'm going a very, very quick, brief history of Jerusalem coming up to the New Testament. And what we see is Israel came into the land around 1445 BC, and David is overtaking this around the year 1000, maybe even a little less than that. So what happens? For 450 years, Jerusalem was not given over to any tribe, which is really amazing, because if you look in that area, we know that the only pure water source is the Gihon spring. There's no water there, and yet here it is in the city of David, which was the Jebusite city at that time. You know, they had all that water source, they had the walls, they had everything that was there. So why on earth, when Joshua was coming in almost 500 years before that, why isn't he taking that area? Because it wasn't his to take. It's Yahweh's. Yahweh set that land from the Garden of Eden, set apart from him, to be his. And somebody had to qualify for that, because this is something that deals with the covenant. It doesn't deal with the physical land, although the physical land is part of the covenant. But it's not just, you just can't go in there and take that physical land. This is something that Yahweh set apart from the Garden of Eden, and now David is the first one who qualifies to go in and take that land. And at that time, who's there? You know, who's there before that? Melchizedek, Yeshua. And that's why the tabernacle of David, which was uncovered, which some of you have seen with me, and I've seen it many times, they're calling it the temple of Melchizedek. Because Melchizedek did sacrifices in there, and who knows, maybe even the sacrifice for Adam and Eve, when he covered them. So 2 Samuel 7, now verse 12. He says, when your days are fulfilled, he's talking to King David, and you lie with your fathers, then I will raise up your seed after you, who shall come out from your loins, and I will establish his kingdom. That's why the Messiah is called the Son of David, right? There's no doubt about it. He shall build a house for my name, and I shall establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I shall be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. If he takes iniquity upon himself, then I will chastise him with a rod of men, and with strokes of the sons of men. Verse 16, and your house, your kingdom, your dynasty, your covenant, your house shall be sure, and your kingdom before me forever. Your throne will be established forever. Because that's why Yeshua is the Son of Man, he's the Son of Elohim, and he's the Son of David, right? Because of this scripture, this is the promise that's given. So this is not about Solomon. You know, because here it is, this is something that's eternal, and never mind eternal, Solomon didn't even have one son who sat in a united kingdom. As soon as Solomon died, what happened? The kingdom was divided between Jeroboam, who was an Ephraimite, who took the northern kingdom, and Rehoboam, who was the son of Solomon, who had Jerusalem in that area. So certainly there's no way, although some rabbis try to say this is about Solomon, no way, if you're honest with yourself, when you're looking at this, you say it's about Solomon. So clearly this is about the eternal covenant through the Son of David, which clearly was Yeshua. There's always a parallel from the earthly to the spiritual. We see it in the Bible all the time. Now we go to 1 Kings 6. What happens after this? 1 Kings 6. In verse 1. And it happened in the 480th year from the going out of the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt. Very interesting. 480 years, 10 more years is, right? It's 77s. 77, 490. This is 480. In the 4th year, in the month of Ziph, it is the 2nd month in the reigning of Solomon over Israel, he built the house for Yahweh. So we know that Yahweh never asked for a house to be built. What did he say? All those years I was in the wilderness, dwelling in a tent, because he's a Bedouin Elohim. Abraham is a Bedouin. He never asked for a house. But he said to David, you know something? Your heart is right. You're living in this big paneled house, and you're seeing me in the tabernacle of David in a tent, and your heart is saying, this ain't right. We need to respect Yahweh more. He says, so I'll allow you to build a house, but not you. There's too much blood on your hand, but your son that will come after you will build that house. This is not the house that he's talking about, the eternal house that we went 2 chapters before that. This is a physical house that was going to be built, and yet he didn't let him build it where the tabernacle of David was. He didn't let him build it in Mount Zion. He built it north of there. And you can see it today. You can see the remains, the ruins. It was, we know it from the Bible, it was in the threshing floor, right? So he allows them, because the real house of Yahweh, the real eternal dynasty, is going to be built exactly in Mount Zion, where the tabernacle of David is. And that's why in the end time it says, I will rebuild the tabernacle of David that is fallen, because when Yeshua returns, that is where he will build the eternal house. But he lets him build this temporary house, and he says, you know what, I won't only build it, I will dwell there. I will dwell there. And I will be your Elohim, and they will be my people. And I will bless you if it's conditional. Remember, the first covenant is conditional. If you obey my statutes, my Torah, and my judgment. So this is where we're at. We go to 1 Kings verse 8 and verse 1. Just go over 2 chapters. Chapter 8 and verse 1. Then Solomon gathered the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the sons of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of Yahweh out of the city of David, which is Mount Zion. Right? So Mount Zion is the city of David. Where are they bringing it? Out of their north to this area where Solomon is going to build the temple. And then Jerusalem is expanded at that point. As a matter of fact, if you go where Solomon built the temple, it is part of Mount Zion today, but it wasn't part of Mount Zion then. And when we're there in Jerusalem, I showed the people, you could clearly see the walls. You could see where it says from Ophel in is part of the original city of David, and north of the Ophel was not. But then it became part of that. So during the time of Solomon, this was part of Mount Zion, which was expanded, but it wasn't originally part of that. But it certainly was not where the tabernacle of David was, as we read it. He took the Ark of the Covenant out of the tabernacle of David and brought it north to where he's building the sanctuary. Now we go to 2 Kings 17. So what happens at this time? Can you imagine? Can you imagine if you're living at this time, and not only did Yahweh do such a miracle to take the people out of the land of Egypt, right? And take them through the very place where we are now, to take them through this wilderness, to do the miracles in Egypt, including the last miracle of killing the firstborn, parting the Red Sea, 900-foot walls on both sides, and they walk through on dry ground. Not only does Yahweh do all that, he does all these miracles, but then he takes them into the promised land, right? And he tells them, okay, you know what? I'll be there for you, but you're going to have to do something too. I want to see how much this means to you. So he allows them to go and fight for themselves, yet he's always there with them. And he battles them, and they beat the Amalekites, and they beat the Amorites, and they beat all these people. And actually, as they're beating them on this side, right, they're going the king of Og and all these things, they're scared to death. And that's why when they come to Moab, they won't even let him come through the land, because they're afraid of Yahweh. And they know him because he used to dwell in Mount Seir. When Job was alive, that's where Yahweh was dwelling, in Mount Seir. So they knew who he was. Jethro knew who Yahweh was, right? He was a priest of Yahweh. And these people are afraid to death because they see 2 million people coming and they know Yahweh is before them. So now they come into the promised land, and you would think these people would be the most zealous, faithful, obedient. And it wasn't. It wasn't. It never was from day one. From day one, they were disobedient. They wouldn't follow. They wanted to be like the nations around them. And they didn't want to follow the ways of Yahweh. And this is the end result. Now let's read it. 2 Kings 17, starting in verse 6. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Syria captured Samaria and removed Israel to Assyria, and made them live in Hala and in Harba by the river Gozan in the city of the Medes. Right? So, not that far north of here, or rather, I should say east of here, that they took them, on this, maybe the very road we're on, that they took them through Iraq going over to Persia, which is modern-day Iran also. So they're in Iraq, they're in Iran. And it was so because the sons of Israel had sinned against Yahweh their Elohim, who brought them up in the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and they feared other gods. And they walked in the statutes of the nations that Yahweh had expelled from the face of the sons of Israel and the kings of Israel that they made. The same thing that Israel did today. After 2,520 years, what happens? He brings them back to the land, and what do? Do they say Yahweh is Elohim? No. They say we want democracy. That's what they want, demonocracy instead. Drop down to verse 11. And they burned incense there in all the high places, like the nations that Yahweh had removed from their face. And they did evil to provoke Yahweh. And they served the idols of which Yahweh had said to them, you shall not do this thing. And Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by the hand of all his prophets and every seer, saying, turn back from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the Torah that I commanded your fathers, that I sent you by the hand of my servants the prophets. And they did not listen. You know, I was given that sermon on Yom Kippur about Jonah and the Assyrians, right? Who didn't even know Yahweh. And he sends Jonah there. And what does Jonah say? Repent. And they're repenting, even the king. Did the Israelites do it? No. No. They killed, like Yeshua said, you kill the prophets that are sent to you. How often, Jerusalem, I would have loved to grab you, you know, as a mother or hen. And you refused. You refused it. And you can't find any time in history where the people didn't. There is not a time in your Bible that you can show that the nation was righteous. From the very beginning until the very end, they were an obstinate people that went against Yahweh. And Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by the hand of all the prophets and every seer, saying, turn back from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the Torah I commanded your fathers. And I sent to you by the hand of my servants the prophets, and they did not listen. And they hardened their necks like the necks of their fathers, who did not remain faithful to Yahweh and the Elohim. The same in the wilderness. 2 million people, 20 and above, to go into the promised land. You know, you think to yourself, you know, here it's a little group of 50 people, right? What's 50 people to 2 million? Well, it's 48 more than went into the promised land. When you break it down how many went in, the number is not that big. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he cut with their fathers, and his testimonies that he testified against them. And they went after the vain thing and became vain after the nations that were around them, of whom Yahweh had commanded them not to do like them. And they forsook all the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim, and they made for themselves cast images, 2 calves, and they made an Asherah, right? And bowed down to the host of the heaven and served Baal. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and they divined divination and used incantations, and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of Yahweh to provoke him. So that Yahweh was very angry against Israel, and turned them away from his face. Not one was left, only the tribe of Judah itself. And that was only for David's sake, because look at the next verse. And Judah did not keep the commands of Yahweh their Elohim, and they walked in the statutes of Israel that they had made. And Yahweh rejected all the seed of Israel, all 12 tribes, and afflicted them, and gave them into the hand of the plunderers, until he had cast them out from his presence. For he tore Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam lured Israel from following Yahweh, and caused them to sin a great sin. And the sons of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam that he did, and they did not turn aside away from them, until Yahweh turned away from Israel from his face, as he spoke by the hand of all his prophets, and Israel was exiled from off its land to Assyria to this day. So it's a terrible thing to think that even after all of those miracles, all of that pleading, Yahweh telling them, they didn't listen. And when you think about it today, you talk about come out of her, my people, right? Leaving Babylon. It's not to think, oh, if I don't live in America, that doesn't involve me. It involves every single person on this planet, because Babylon has brought this culture and this system to all the earth. And it affects every single person. And when Yahweh is saying, come out of her, my people, he's not just talking about the people in America that come out of the physical land of America. That's part of it. But he's talking about all of his people to come out of this evil culture that has been created in this time. The way Israel didn't want to. They wanted that culture. They wanted to be like the nations around them. While Yahweh's presence dwelt on the Ark of the Covenant. Can you imagine? As he's dwelling there in the Ark of the Covenant, that's what they looked for. And then it got to the point that Yahweh said, enough. Enough. And I believe we're at that point now in this time. Because there is a reason we're in the wilderness. There's a reason why we're not in Jerusalem anymore. We're in the wilderness because Yahweh has to purify us. We have to seek His face, and we have to get away from the culture of Satan that's out there. And it's sad. It's a really sad thing. But like I said, the Jerusalem today, if you go there, is not the Jerusalem that Yeshua will be in. It's not. It's not. Did Yahweh give up on His people, though? No. No, because Yahweh is faithful. Yahweh made a promise to David, and He made a promise to Abraham, and a promise to Isaac, and a promise to Jacob. And He is keeping that promise, and Israel being a nation today is part of that promise. It's prophetic. It's Yahweh's hand. But like He says in Ezekiel, it's not because of the good of the people. It's because of His righteousness. So let's see what happens from there. Right? From there, 2 Kings 25. 2 Kings 25, verse 1 through 4. And it happened in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th of the month, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came, and he and his army against Jerusalem, encamped against it, and built a siege mount around it. And the city entered into siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. And on the 9th of the month, when the famine was severe in the city, and there was no bread for the people of the land, then the city was broken into. And by night, and all the men of war went by the way of the gate, between the two walls of the king's garden, that's down near the pool of Siloam, down on the bottom there. Some of you have been there. And the Chaldeans were against the city all around, and the king went the way toward the Arabah. That's why I always point out, where we're near the house of Caiaphas, the Arabah that goes down to the Dead Sea. And drop down to verse 8. And in the 5th month, on the 7th of the month, it was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the chief of the executioners, the servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. And he burned the house of Yahweh, and the king's house, and the houses of Jerusalem. Yea, he burned every great house with fire. And today, by a miracle of Yahweh, you can go there, like we have. You go in modern Jerusalem, in the old city, right? And it looks like just buildings. And you walk in that building, and there's stairs going down, and you go down the stairs, and there's a sign that says you just went back in time 2,000 years. And the houses there that Yahweh preserved from 2,000 years ago, and literally there is burnt wood from this, what I'm talking about, that Yahweh shows, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. You can still go there and get the sulfur balls, showing His destruction because of their disobedience. So, did Yahweh prophesy now? Did He prophesy how long they would be in captivity? He certainly did. Leviticus 26. Leviticus 26. So now, the first time ever, they would not be a sovereign nation. And that's why when you read Ezra and Nehemiah, when they came back to the land after 70 years, they were so humbled. And they had such the fear of Yahweh because they never thought in a million years, they thought they'd be punished. They thought maybe they wouldn't get rain. But they never thought that Yahweh would allow His own sanctuary to be burned down and all the people to be taken off the land. So Ezra and Nehemiah really were trying to bring the people back to be the fervency of the Torah. But how long will the punishment last that they would not be a sovereign nation? Leviticus 26 and verse 13. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who has brought you out from the land of the Egyptians, from being their slaves, and I will break the bars of your yoke and cause you to stand erect. And if you will not listen to me, and do not do all these commandments, and if you reject my statutes, and if your soul hates my judgments, as to not to do all these commands to the breaking of my covenant, I will also do this to you, and I shall appoint terror over you, the wasting and the burning fever, the destroying the eyes, the consuming soul. And you shall sow your seed in vain, and your enemies will eat it. And I shall set my face against you, and you shall be smitten before your enemies. And those who hate you shall rule over you. And you shall flee, and there will be no one pursuing you. And if after these things you still will not listen to me, then I will chastise you 7 times more for your sins. And I will break the pot of your strength, and I will make your heavens as iron, and your earth as copper. And your strength will be consumed in vain, and your land will not give her produce, and the tree of the land will not give its fruit. And if you still walk contrary to me, and will not listen to me, then I will bring 7 times more plagues on you for your sins. It's very interesting, because a miracle that still, they don't really understand it, the agriculturalists, that Israel, when Israel became a nation again in 1948, it was filled with malaria. That's why Australia was able to give a lot of trees to Israel that they planted to drive the malaria. And it was one, per square mile, I guess you could say, one of the most places on earth for malaria, for the smallness of that country. And really, it was like here. It's like desert. There was nowhere to grow. And by a miracle, somehow, it started to change. And it was part of this prophecy, because Yahweh prophesied for a time. See, he keeps saying, I will punish you 7 times more, 7 times more, 7 times more. You take a prophetic year, 360, times it by 7, you come out to exactly 2,520 years. Take from 573 BC, when that captivity is happening, which I just read, add those 2,520 years, you come exactly to 1948. So like he said in Ezekiel, he's not bringing them back because of their goodness. He's not bringing them back because they changed their heart. He's bringing them back because their captivity ended. It's like your child, right? If you have a child who's doing something wrong, and you say, okay, you're going to go into timeout here for 20 minutes or half an hour, you're not letting them out of the timeout because they did something good. You're letting them out because the punishment's finished. Or somebody in prison. A murderer could go to prison for 15 years. He's not coming out because he changed his life. He's coming out because he fulfilled the requirements of the punishment. And that's what Yahweh says when he brings them back in Ezekiel 36. I'm not bringing you back because your heart has changed. I'm bringing you back because of my goodness. Because the punishment is fulfilled. Now I'll give you another chance. Now let's see if your heart is going to change. Now let me see, because Yahweh is very, very fair. So he's giving them the opportunity to change from that point. In verse 33, the last scripture, I'll go there in chapter 26. He says, and I will scatter you among the nations, and shall draw out the sword after you, and your land shall become a waste, and your cities shall become a desolation. Exactly what happened from the punishment, and exactly the time frame. So now, when we get to the New Testament, right? We get to Matthew 4 and 8 and 9. Matthew 4 and 8 and 9. It says, and again, the devil takes him to a high mountain, talking about Yeshua, and he shows him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he says to him, I will give all these things to you, if falling down you will worship me. And I find it very interesting, because Yeshua could only speak truth, right? A matter of fact, some of the things in the New Testament are so profound that you're in awe that he would say the kind of things that he said. And here is Satan, right? Satan, the adversary, the devil, the evil one, telling him, if you bow down to me, I'll give you these kingdoms. And you would think the first thing Yeshua would do, besides rebuking him, is telling him, you have no authority over these kingdoms. But Yeshua never says that. Because from the Garden of Eden, Satan is the god of this world, right? Satan is the god of this world. And we know in the time we're living in now, Satan will even be given dominion over Jerusalem. It says it. I'm going to read you the scriptures. So again, are we looking toward earthly Jerusalem, or are we looking toward Jerusalem from above? Because I know people, that we've met many, many people in Israel that were believers that actually denied Yeshua simply that they can live in earthly Jerusalem. Even denying Yeshua. So as Yahweh is restoring, right? He is restoring Israel in the end time. Satan is also building his kingdom. And they're going parallel. And that's why, like I said, Babylon is a place, but Babylon is also a worldwide system that place is brought to the world. Now you go to John 18 and verse 36. Very interesting scripture. I've read this in another sermon, but it's very interesting. John 18 and verse 36. And this is when Yeshua is before Pilate, right? And it says, Yeshua answered, Pilate is asking him, are you a king, right? And where is he? He's in where they're calling the Temple Mount. They're in the Fort Antonia. They're bringing Yeshua there. And Pilate's asking him, what do you do, right? And he's asking him, are you a king? Yeshua answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom was of this world, my servants would have fought that I might not be delivered up to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from here. Where is he saying this? He's saying this on the top of the Antonio in Jerusalem. So he's in Jerusalem saying, my kingdom is not from here. Isn't he the king of Jerusalem? Of course he's the king of Jerusalem. So it's the same place, but it's not the same kingdom. It's not the same kingdom. The kingdom of Jerusalem today is not the heavenly Jerusalem. Same place where it's going to be, but it's not the same. And I think that some of our African brethren, because most of them have never been there, praise Yahweh, like Elder Quill and Elder Kolang have been in Jerusalem several different times. But 98% of the people haven't been there. And I think sometimes the Africans think it's like the Bible. Like they're reading the Bible and they think you're going to come there and you're going to ascend up and you're going to see like the Ark of the Covenant. And Yahweh, that's not the Jerusalem today. Praise Yahweh. He has unearthed many, many archaeological things that He preserved there. And I consider it one of the greatest blessings of my life to be there 22 years and to have seen those things. To see the tabernacle of David. But still, you know what? They're ruins. They're ruins. You're seeing a shadow of something that will be the reality. The reality of it is not there yet. The reality of it will not be there until Yeshua returns. And we have to make a choice. The same way, do you want to live for earthly Babylon or do you want to come out of Babylon? Do you want to live for earthly Jerusalem or do you want to live for heavenly Jerusalem? Because earthly Jerusalem today has homosexuals walking the street hand in hand kissing. Totally fine. Earthly Jerusalem today has terror. They have people over there killing each other, doing all these things. And it's not the kingdom of Yahweh. And we have to come to that conclusion that it is the place where the kingdom of Yahweh will be forever. But earthly Jerusalem right now is not that kingdom. It is not that kingdom. We got to get rid of these preconceived wrong ideas that we've had in our head to realize we need to be living for the kingdom above. Revelation 12:9 says Satan has deceived the whole world. And you know, it's very interesting, and again, our ministry being in Israel for 22 years up to this point is prophetic, there's no doubt about it, because Yahweh has blessed us to be able to see the real places, to go to the real Gilgal, to go to the real city of David, to see the tabernacle of David, right? Many, many things that are in the land. And to be able to, for me to be able to take thousands of brethren there and share with you the truth, it's been, I'm telling you, it's a pearl of gold that Yahweh has given me. But in reality, take us aside away for a minute, right? Satan has deceived the whole world. He's also deceived the whole world with Jerusalem, right? You have people coming there thinking that Fort Antonia is the Temple Mount. You have Jews every day praying and bowing to a Roman wall. And the scripture says it. Your back is always bowing. Because even that in itself, this bowing, is pagan. You never see that in Scripture. Yahweh saying that you're supposed to bow like this in a pagan manner. The Church of the Sepulchre, where they say Yeshua was crucified, cannot be the place because it's within the walls of the old city and it's behind where the temple was. And the centurion who saw the veil of the temple ripped in two with his eyes said, this is truly the Son of Elohim. So how can that be behind where the crucifixion would be? It makes no sense. So you're seeing all these things. You're seeing whether it's the Jews with the false birthplace. You know, praise Yahweh, many of you, we go to Shepherd's Field where Yeshua was really born. Most people, where do they go? They go to this church of whatever they call it, over there, you know, where they claim Yeshua was born, and it's just a pagan place. It's a pagan place. False burial, false birthplace, false churches everywhere, false Temple Mount, and a false religious spirit with both Muslim, Jews, and Christians, all of them. So, is Yahweh the author of confusion? It always wondered me for years. You know, it's like you would think Jerusalem, you'd have the most peace of anywhere. It's the golden streets, it's where the truth is. But I've always said, what New York is to business is what Jerusalem is to religion. You know, so something's missing there. You know, I've seen people come there seeking Yahweh and wind up becoming atheists. Or, you know, or worse. So there's something that's there that it's two spirits that are battling. And I told many of the people in the government at the Knesset time after time, the problem why you haven't solved this problem with the Palestinians and the Jews is because you're trying to solve a spiritual problem in a physical way. It's a spiritual problem. And that's what the Jews don't get. They think, we are the chosen people, that can never matter. You're Gentiles, you don't mean nothing. And that's the way they believe, that we're almost like subhuman. And does Yahweh really think that way? Does Yahweh look at the color of your skin? Does He look if you're male or female? Does He look at if you look a certain way or you come from a certain area? Is that really the way the Creator of the universe works? Of course not. And that's what He says. He looks at the heart of a person. And He goes to them that seeks Him. And He says, I will be kind to those who are kind to me, and I won't to the ones who won't. And again, I'm not against our brother. I love them. I've been there many, many years with them, you know, and I pray for them every day. But they are not. That is not what Yahweh is working in this time right now. Judaism is not the religion of Yahweh. It certainly is not. So we have all these things that are a deception. And that's why, like I said, nothing wrong with being in earthly Jerusalem. It's a great thing because Yahweh is the one restoring that nation, and Yahweh has done miracles to help them, even in their ignorance. But don't give your eternal life up for earthly Jerusalem when it's heavenly Jerusalem we should be looking for. Amos 9:13 and 14. He says, "And I will bring back the captivity of my people Israel, and they will build away cities and live in them, and they will plant vineyards and drink the wine of them, and they will also make gardens and eat the fruit of them." In verse 13, the one before that says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, that the plowman will overtake the reaper and the treader of grapes with him who draws along seed. And the mountains shall drip new must, and all the hills will be dissolved." So, like I said, I don't want anybody to confuse what I'm saying, because I've been preaching it for the last 25 years, that Yahweh is working with the nation of Israel. He is restoring the nation of Israel. But again, nothing has changed in His word, that if you want to receive the blessing, you have to be obedient. And today they're not. They're simply not. And what's scary is, not only aren't they obedient, that recently there has been a major push. In the last year, many of the major cities no longer keep Shabbat laws. I used to say, nowhere else in the world can you go but Israel. And you could fight with a Christian or you could fight with a Jew all week long, but when the sun is setting on Friday, you have to shake their hand and say Shabbat Shalom. Only place in the world. No more. No more. Now the sun sets, the stores are up, the buses are running, because people don't want it. They don't want the Sabbath day. They're rejecting the very covenant that made them who they are. And now they can't, if you see, very odd, this is the first time this has happened, they can't form a government. They might have to go to the third election, because the battle of their soul is on this. Because in this next election, who becomes government, they already said, we want to wipe the Sabbath out completely. We do not want to take the Orthodox in the government because we want a secular nation. Is judgment coming? You better believe it's coming. Did Yahweh bring us to the wilderness? Yes, Yahweh's bringing us to the wilderness. Yahweh is bringing us to the wilderness. Zechariah 1 and verse 2. And even though it is the hand of Yahweh who's created the modern nation of Israel, overall, Yahweh's blessing has not been there these last 70 years. He wants it to be there. He's asked to give their blessing, but they've been refusing it. And we see it here in Zechariah, a very interesting book, 14 chapters, all about the end time. Really, really, maybe after Daniel, we could start doing Zechariah, because it's a great book, end time book. But in Zechariah, verse 1, it says, "In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, the word of Yahweh came to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, Yahweh has been angry with your fathers, very angry." So Yahweh is very angry. "Therefore you say to them, so says Yahweh of hosts, turn back to me, says Yahweh of hosts, and I will turn back to you, says Yahweh of hosts." So all He wants is us to turn back. He doesn't have spite. He doesn't have bitterness. It's not saying, well, I asked you so many times and you didn't turn, now I will. No, He only wants us to turn back to Him. But look what it says in verse 4. "Do not be as your fathers, to whom the former prophets have proclaimed to them, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, turn back now from your evil ways and your evil doings. But they did not hear or pay attention to me, says Yahweh." And that's the same that's happening today. When I try to share with our brothers there, our Jewish brothers, they don't want to hear it. We're the chosen people. We don't need to hear that. Some people have told me, and even rabbis, Yahweh can't take His blessing from us. It's impossible, no matter what we do. And I say, where have you been? What world are you living in? You just were in diaspora 2,520 years. What are you talking about? But there's a delusional spirit to a certain degree that's there. In verse 12, "And the messenger of Yahweh answered," okay, this is all end time stuff. Listen what he says. "O Yahweh of hosts, until when will you not have pity on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which you have cursed these 70 years? Right? In 70 years of Jerusalem, they're filled with wars, with terrorism, with suicide bombers, with all kinds of things going on there. And it didn't have to be that way. It's not Yahweh who's causing it. We reap what we sow. And it's their refusal to accept Him and His ways that are doing it. And this last year, something really, really big has happened, which I believe is the nail in the coffin. Because we read already in Luke 17 that when Yeshua is rejected by this generation, that's when the end will come. And I believe by starting to kill a lamb again, which hasn't been done by them since the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and starting to kill a lamb again at the Fort Antoniac, because it does say the abomination of desolation, which is in the wrong place. I do believe maybe it's not the abomination of desolation, but it is a abomination of desolation. And I think it is very, very serious in their rejection of what Yahweh is doing in the end time. Nothing is by chance. But then we have Jeremiah 25, right? Now Babylon and Israel, they're going side by side, the same as it was in Bible days. So when we look at Jeremiah 25, because when we piece these things together, we really can get a picture of what's happening today. What is Yahweh doing today, and what should we be doing? What is the reason why we're here? Jeremiah 25 and verse 4. And Yahweh was sent to all of his servants the prophets, rising early and sending. But you have not listened nor bowed your ear to hear. Saying, now turn each one from his evil way and from the evil of your doings, and live on the land which Yahweh has given to you and your fathers from forever even to forever. And do not go after other gods to serve them and to worship them. And do not provoke me to anger with the works of your hands, and I will do you no harm. Yet you have not listened to me, says Yahweh, so that you might provoke me to anger with the works of your hands for evil to you. So Yahweh of hosts says this, because you have not obeyed my voice, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, that says Yahweh, and Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon my servant, and I will bring them against the land and against those living in it, and against all these nations all around, and I will completely destroy them and make a horror and a hissing and everlasting ruins. And I will take from them the voice of rejoicing, and the voice of gladness, right? And the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstone, and the light of the lamp. Maybe that's why we're not there, right? The voice of the feast is going to be taken out of there because of their rejection. And this whole land will be a waste and horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And any way you look at it, it's at the mouth of Yahweh, so he's the one who names it. We're close to that. And it will be when 70 years are fulfilled, I will punish the king of Babylon and the nation and the land of the Chaldeans for their iniquity, says Yahweh, and I will make it everlasting ruin. So what happens? Babylon does not help Israel. Israel is being attacked by their neighbors. Psalm 83 war that comes. Israel is getting punished and chastised, and Babylon goes down for what they did. And I will bring on that land all the words which I have spoken against it, and all that is written in the book which Jeremiah prophesied against these nations. So wow. I mean, we're living it. We're seeing it. We're seeing all this stuff being laid out over here. Revelation 13:2. Revelation 13:2 talks about the beast, which I saw was like a leopard, his feet like the feet of a bear, its mouth as a lion's mouth. And we know in Daniel it talks about with eagle's wings. And the dragon gave its power to its throne, the great authority. It's really interesting. Like if you talk about the end time beast power, the United Nations that's there. You have the leopard, which is France, which is very interesting because Normandy, right? That's where the big battle took place, the Battle of Normandy, which made the Allies and the U.S. win the war. What is the flag of Normandy? It's the flag of the leopard. So you have the leopard France, the bear Russia, the lion with eagle's wings, the U.S., UK, and the dragon China, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. So we already see this beast is there. And like I said, they might not call it UN after the war, they may call it something else, but it's already there. It doesn't matter what they call it. The beast is already there, all these things are already set up. And then what happens, Daniel 11, verse 15 and 16. Because Yahweh will allow the beast power to overtake Jerusalem, and Satan will rule from Jerusalem for 42 months. Daniel 11, 15 and 16. And the king of the north shall come and pour out a siege mound and siege a fortified city, and the arms of the south will not stand, nor his choice people, for there will be no firmness to stand. But he who comes against him will do as he desires, and none will stand before him, and he will stand in the glorious land, in Israel, and destruction shall be in his hand. So this is where Jerusalem will be surrounded by armies. The beast power will overtake it. Go back a couple of chapters to Daniel 8, in verse 23. That we see about the beast power in that time, or the anti-Messiah, let's say. It says, in the latter time of their kingdom, when the apostasy has been complete, right? It's talking about the latter time of the kingdom of this UN, these 5 kings, like he's talking about, right? In the latter time, here we are, we're 70 years into it already. 70 is a number of endpoint. He says, a king strong of face and understanding dark sentences will stand up, the anti-Messiah. And his power will be mighty, but not by his own power, right? Because it may look like a man, but Satan will possess a human body at that time. And he shall destroy wondrously, and he shall prosper in work and destroy the powerful and the holy people. And we know that from Revelation 13:7, Revelation 13:5. What does Satan do when he comes down to the earth? He's coming after the people of Yahweh. And in Daniel 8, it talks about this, that he will be able to conquer us for a time. And that's when the great martyrism will come. And also through his policy, through the policy of the anti-Messiah, he will make deceit succeed in the land. Satan's already doing it throughout the world. And he will lift himself up in his heart, and by peace he will destroy many. So will they make some kind of peace deal? Sure. Will it be good? No. No, it'll be a sham like everything else, and many, many people will die. And by peace he will destroy many. He will also stand against the Prince of Princes, Yeshua. But he shall be shattered without a hand. We know in the end, like I said, praise Yahweh, we have the book, we read the end, we win. So we don't have to fear what's coming. We don't have to fear it. 2 Thessalonians 2, we see the same thing. 2 Thessalonians 2. Then verse 3. Second Thessalonians 2 and verse 3 says, do not let anyone deceive you in any way, because that day, the day of Yahweh, will not come unless first there comes a great rebellion, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. We're just reading about him, right? The one opposing and exalting himself over everything being called Elohim, or object of reverence, so as for him to sit in the sanctuary of Elohim as an El, and sets himself forth as he is Elohim. We just read he's going to overtake Jerusalem, and he's going to rule from there. Do you not remember that I told you these things when I was with you? And now you know what has prevented him from being revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already working, right? We already know it. We already see it. Until he who is now the obstacle is taken out of the way. So the only thing holding it up is Yahweh's grace is still in the world. But we read in Daniel, there'll be a point where Yahweh will take his grace from the world. And woe in that day. Woe in that day. Because today, whether you're righteous or not, the sun will rain. Right? It rained last night. It didn't only rain on one area. But it did during the Exodus. So we don't have to worry about it in that day, but we know it. Once Yeshua is completely rejected, then he'll allow this to happen. And then the lawless one will be exposed, whom our master Yeshua will consume by the spirit of his mouth, and will destroy by the brightness of his coming. We know that his coming is due to the working of Satan in all power and miraculous signs and lying wonders. We're already seeing them today. And in all deceit of unrighteousness. And those who will perish, because why are they perishing? Because they did not love the truth in order for them to be saved. We have to love the truth. Like I said, you can't just be a truth seeker, you have to be a truth lover. Because I've seen truth seekers. Truth seekers, if they don't like what they hear, they just put it to the side. They decide for themselves. They pick and choose. A truth lover takes it at face value. And because of this, Elohim will send to them a working of deception for them to believe the lie. That those not believing in the truth but have delighted in unrighteousness will all be damned. But we ought to thank Elohim always concerning you, brothers, beloved by Yahweh, because Elohim chose you from the beginning to salvation. How? In sanctification of the Spirit and through a true faith. That's why we're here. We need to be sanctified in order to enter the kingdom. So then, brothers, stand firm and strongly hold the commandments you were taught, whether by word or by epistle. Is doctrine important? Of course it is. If not, we might as well sit here with Sikhs and Hindus and everybody else. No, something makes us different. The Spirit of Yahweh and the Spirit of Yahweh, the belief system of the truth. Because there's only one truth and that truth doesn't change. And like I said, our forefathers were willing to die for that truth, and we have to also. Because it's the time we're living. So how bad will it get in Israel when this happens? Zechariah 13. How bad will this be? Zechariah 13 and verse 8. And it will be in all the land, says Yahweh, 2 parts will be cut off and perish, but the third will be left. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. They will call on my name, and I will answer them, and I will say, it is my people, and they will say, Yahweh is my Elohim. So wow, can you imagine that? 2/3 immediately die, and at the last third, only a remnant is going to come out. So most of the people there, we know it from Revelation 11 when the 2 witnesses are crucified. What does it say? There's a great earthquake in the city, and 1/10 of the people die, 7,000 people. Today there's 1 million people living in Jerusalem. At that point, there will only be 70,000. More than 90% of the people would have already been dead by that point. So we're talking about some serious stuff that's coming down here. Jeremiah 5. Jeremiah 5. And why? Because the people, like I said, they have refused to accept Yahweh. And as time is going on, it's not getting better. They're not getting a repentant heart. We're not getting a Jonah moment. It's the opposite. They're getting harder and more resilient and more against Yahweh. Same as what we see in Western society. Jeremiah 5, roam around in Jerusalem's streets and see and know and see in her plazas if you can find a man, if there is one who does justice, just one, who seeks truth, and I will pardon her. And though they say, as Yahweh lives, surely they swear falsely. Oh Yahweh, are not your eyes for the truth? You struck them, but they felt no pain. You consumed them, yet they refused to take correction. You know, after war, suicide bomber after suicide bomber, death after death, all this stuff going on, and they still don't change. They don't change. They refuse to take correction. They made their faces harder than rock, and they refuse to return. So I said, surely they are poor, they are foolish, for they do not know the way of Yahweh, the judgment of their Elohim. Verse 7, why should I pardon you for this? Your sons have forsaken me, have sworn by ones who are not Elohim. When I fed them to the full, they committed adultery and gathered themselves by troops in a harlot's house. And then he just keeps going on. Verse 11, for the house of Israel and the house of Judah have been very devious with me, claims Yahweh. They have lied against Yahweh and said, it is not he, and no evil shall come upon us, and we will not see sword or famine. And the prophets shall become wind, and the word is not in them, so it shall be done to them. Therefore Yahweh Elohim of hosts says this, because you spoke this word, behold, I will make my words fire in your mouth, and these people wood, and it shall consume them. Behold, I will bring a nation on you from afar, O house of Israel, declares Yahweh. It is an enduring nation, an ancient nation, a nation whose language you do not know nor understand what they say. And more than likely, he's talking about Persia. You know, Farsi. They don't speak Arabic, they speak Farsi. And we see it today. We see the Turks, we see the Iranians, we see the Russians, all coming together. You know what's very interesting? If you look at Psalm 83, a war that hasn't happened yet, and you look at those nations in there, they're all part of the old Ottoman Empire. Everyone that's there. And as we speak, Turkey is not that far north of us, already annihilating the Kurds and getting ready for their next move. So we see prophecy coming alive before our eyes. But you know, like I said, let's go to the end of the book. Zechariah 14. Maybe not the end of the book in book order we have here, but the end of the book as far as what's going to happen here. Zechariah 14. And we know in the end, if we endure to the end, the same will be saved. Zechariah 14, behold, the day of Yahweh comes, and your spoil will be divided among you. For I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem, and the city will be captured, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. And half the city will go into exile, and the rest of the people will be cut off from the city. And Yahweh will go out and fight against those nations like the day he fought in the day of battle. And his feet will stand in that day on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives will divide from its middle, from the east even to the west, a very great valley. And half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. So wow, Yahweh is all merciful, he's all loving, he's all forgiving. And even at their turning away from him, and even at their refusal to come back to him, he still is a loving Father, still loving them. And Yeshua is still coming back. And this is the time when they see him come and his feet on the Mount of Olives, like it says in Zechariah 12:10, they will look on him whom they've pierced, and they will mourn like they mourn for an only son. So, like I say, it's a message of hope, not only for us, but also for our brother. It's not the end of them. They are going to go through a major chastisement, but in the end, Yahweh still loves them, and this is what's happening. Revelation 19. Revelation 19, we see it again in verse 11. We see the end of this is Yeshua coming back and setting up Jerusalem from above. Revelation 19 and verse 11. And I saw heaven being opened, and behold, a white horse, and him sitting on it, having been called Faithful and True. And he judges and makes war in righteousness. And his eyes were a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, with many titles written on it. And one of the titles he had been written, no man knew but him himself. And having been clothed in a garment which had been dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yahweh. And the armies in heaven followed him on white horses, being dressed in fine linen, white and pure. And out of his mouth goes forth a sharp sword, that with it he might smite the nations. And he will shepherd them with an iron rod. And he treads the winepress of the wine of the anger and the wrath of Yahweh Almighty. He brings the day of Yahweh with him. And he has on his garment and on his thigh a name having been written, King of Kings and Master of Masters. Wow. So, like I say, the same as we just saw in Zechariah 14, that we see Yeshua to return and purify the land. To purify the land. As a matter of fact, if we go back a couple of chapters, Revelation 14 and verse 15. It says, another cherub went forth out of the sanctuary, crying with a great voice to the one sitting on the cloud, send your sickle and reap, because your hour to reap came, because the harvest of the earth was dry. And the one sitting on the cloud thrust his sickle into the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another cherub went forth out of the sanctuary in heaven, also having a sharp sickle. And then verse 19, and the cherub thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and threw them into the winepress of the great anger of Yahweh. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, outside of Jerusalem, and blood went out from the winepress as far as the bridles of horses, from 1,600 furlongs. That's equal to 180 miles by 4.5 feet high of blood. That's the purification that's coming when Yeshua returns. That's a lot of purification that's coming there. So, here we are, Daniel 9, and verse 24 and 25, just to again put the perspective of the time that we're here. Daniel 9:24 says, 70 weeks are decreed as to your people and to your holy city, the city of Jerusalem, to finish transgression, to make an end of sins, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring an everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. This is at Yeshua's second coming, not his first coming. Because if we go in Jerusalem today, certainly there's not an end of sin, there's not an end of iniquity, and again, the other things that are written here, bringing an everlasting righteousness has not happened yet. Now he tells us, he says, know then and understand that from the issuing of the word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, 69 weeks. It shall be built again with a plaza and a trench, even in times of affliction. So it's very interesting that the first time Yeshua came, this decree went out in 457 BC, I believe it was. You add in the 483 years, you come exactly to 27 AD, when Yeshua's ministry starts. And it's one of the prophecies that's very powerful with rabbis, because they really don't have an answer. And that's why they try to change the timing of the Persian Empire, instead of being 240 years to about 40 years, because they really don't have an answer. But yet this is all end time. The book of Daniel is end time. So the same way that the 70 weeks prophecy showed his first coming, it would also show his second coming. And it's very interesting that if you look at the walls of Jerusalem today, most of them are not the ancient walls. There's about 10,000 Herodian stones, most of them on the west and also on the south. But most of the stones that are there today were built by who? Solomon I, who gave the decree to go and rebuild and restore in 1538. So 77s from there brings you to the year 2028, 2029, right? Yet, he comes after 69 sevens, right? Because we know Yeshua comes for his bride in the wilderness. We know it is Ezekiel 34. So it's very interesting that brings us to 2021. That's only a couple of years away, 2021, 22 for Yeshua. And that's why he's coming for his bride in the wilderness, and he's going to train his bride in the wilderness, but he's only training his bride. He's not training everybody. And that's why it says in Matthew, if they say he's over here, don't go. Because you know what? There's going to be a lot of false rumors in those days. When people hear Yeshua is here, we heard that Yeshua is here, and people are going to try to go. For years, there's been people that have planted themselves living down outside of Petra. They think Petra is the place. And they think, ha ha ha, as long as I'm here, I'll be the first ones in. Most of them wound up going back years ago. You know, they got tired of playing cards in the stock market. But it's not being in a place that's going to get you there. It's being sanctified. Because he even says, even in the wilderness, Yahweh will weed out the rebels. Even in the wilderness. So, here we are. I mean, we're at that spot. And again, I'm not making any predictions in time except to say we are in the season. There's no doubt about that. 70 is an endpoint. It's already 70 years of Babylon. It's the 70th Passover. And even with the nations, you know, China, the dragon, right? And Satan is the dragon. And you better believe there's a lot of demonic stuff going on with China. This year is the 70th anniversary of China. 70 is a number of endpoint. Life cycle, endpoint, and many of these things are happening from that time. So, if we go to Galatians 4, Galatians 4 and verse 19, it's a very interesting thing that the Apostle Paul talks about here. Galatians 4. And verse 19. It says, my children whom I travail for until Messiah should be formed, until Messiah should be fully formed in you. So Paul is saying he travails for these people until he's fully formed, because he's not fully formed. He's growing in us, but we're not fully formed yet. We're like a embryo inside of a womb of a mother, and we're growing here until the time he returns, and we shed these bodies, and we will be born again at that time when he returns. So he says, even now I wish I could be with you and change my tone of voice, because I have deep concern regarding you. I say to you, those that desire to let themselves be under the penalty of the Torah, do you hear the Torah? For it has been written, Abraham had 2 sons, one out of the slave woman and one out of the free woman, right? Who's the one out of the slave woman? Ishmael. Who's the one out of the free woman? Isaac. But indeed, he of the slave woman has been born according to flesh. Right? What happened? Because they didn't believe in Yahweh. They didn't wait on him. So Hagar, the slave woman, came. And he out of the free woman through the promise. Therefore, these were symbolic of the 2 covenants. The first from Mount Sinai given birth to bondage, which is Hagar. Do you know the insult that he's given the Jews in here? He's telling them, the ones that are in the first covenant, you know, the rabbis and the Pharisees and the Jews there, that they are actually from the lineage of Ishmael. That they are in a covenant of bondage, because there's no salvation in that covenant. For Hagar is Mount Sinai, which is in Arabia. Very interesting, not that far from here. And it surrenders to who? To this Jerusalem, which is now in the bondage with her children. He's in Jerusalem telling them this, right? You know, and he's telling them that this Jerusalem then, physical Jerusalem, is in bondage with her children. And he's comparing the Jews, not to Isaac, he's comparing them to Ishmael. And comparing modern Jerusalem to the bondage, because it hasn't surrendered over to Yahweh. But the Jerusalem which is above, the one that Yeshua brings with him, the new covenant is free, who is the mother of us all. For it has been written, be glad, barren one not bearing, break forth and shout, the one not travailing. For the sons of those who are forsaken greatly outnumber the favored ones. And what he's saying is that us Ephraimites from all over the world, our numbers are much, much bigger than the numbers of our brother Judah. So it's like, even though everything he's saying is absolutely true, wow, what an insult. What an insult to say this to those people in that time. He says, but brothers, we are children of the promise according to Isaac. But then even as he, born according to flesh, persecuted the one according to spirit, so it is now. Right? Are we persecuted? You better believe it. You know, are we being accepted by our brother Judah? Are we accepted by the rabbis? Absolutely not. I went through for 22 years with the rabbis, and we certainly are not accepted. Absolutely not. He says, but what says the scripture? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for in no way shall the son of the slave woman inherit with the son of the free woman. What did we just read? 2/3 will perish, 1/3 will come through. And unfortunately, because of their abstinence and because of their rejection, most of them will not be there when the kingdom comes. Because the slave woman will not inherit with the free woman. So, believe me, I've been there for almost 20 years. One 19-year time cycle keeping the feast. It's the greatest honor of my life to be there. But I understand why we're here in the wilderness now. Because it's the time to prepare for the free woman that's coming. It's the time to prepare for the Jerusalem above. And the great blessing we've had to see the Jerusalem now, the earthly Jerusalem is given over now to the Ark of the Covenant. So each of us have to decide which one we want to commit to. But what the scripture says, cast out the slave woman and her son, for in no way shall the son of the slave woman inherit with the son of the free. Then brothers, we are not sons of a slave woman, but we are sons of the free woman. And that's what our banking is on, like I said. Because most of our brethren have never even seen Jerusalem. They've never seen it. I wish they could have. Because like I said, it's a wonderful place, and Yahweh has preserved so many places. But I believe now it's the time that judgment is coming. I really believe it's the time. Earthly Jerusalem today is in bondage to a religious spirit and a government that is following the God of this world. And that's why there's terrorism, false religion, rampant sin, and even, like I said, many messianics that are quitting on Yeshua and going back to Judaism. Hebrews 13, 12 through 14. Hebrews 13, 12 through 14. It says, indeed, because of this, in order that he might sanctify the people by his own blood, Yeshua suffered outside the gate, right? He had to be crucified outside the gate. He was crucified on the Mount of Olives, outside the city. It says, so, let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach, for we do not have here, right? And he's talking about Jerusalem. That's where Yeshua was crucified. Look what he says in verse 14. For we do not have here a permanent city, but we seek the city coming. We do not have here a permanent city. Modern Jerusalem is not our permanent city. It's the city that is coming. Is Jerusalem Yahweh's headquarters? Absolutely. Is it the city he set apart to put his name? Absolutely. Is it where the Garden of Eden was? Absolutely. Is it going to get punished now because they refused Yahweh? Absolutely. Saddening, but it's true. Even though it's the same place, it's not the same city as today. We must look toward eternal heavenly Jerusalem, which is free, and not the one that's in bondage. But as we enter the wilderness, we must never forget Jerusalem as Yahweh's eternal set-apart capital where he placed his name. We must pray daily for the peace of Jerusalem and its restoration, for Jerusalem is still our eternal home. So it would not be fitting before Yahweh to give a sermon like this without ending with Psalm 137. And for me, it's the first time in many, many years that I have to read this now at feast time in diaspora instead of being there. Psalm 137. There by the rivers of Babylon we sat down, also we wept when we remembered Zion. We hung our lyres on the willows in the midst. For there our captors asked us the words of a song, yea, our plunderers asked joy, saying, sing to us a joy of Mount Zion. How shall we sing the song of Yahweh on a foreign soil? Praise Yahweh, we're not actually on foreign soil, though, since this is the other side of the promised land. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget. Let my tongue cleave to my palate. If I do not remember you, if I do not bring up Jerusalem above the head of my joy. So as we end, I just want to remind us all, we never want to forget Jerusalem. We are in the eastern part of the Promised Land, the very place the Israelites passed through, but failed to make it to Israel and perished in the wilderness. And even though we are where we need to be at this time, let's never forget the last stop is Jerusalem. Yahweh bless. Chag Sameach. The song? Yeah, but let's close it.